Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, where we bring in leaders from various fields of expertise, sit down with them one-on-one and gain their insights from their areas of expertise, and then understand what it is top of mind for them in the past, present, and future. Today, we have Manoj, who's the CRO of Elektrobit. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. Really excited to be here.
Of course, man. Tell us a little bit about Elektrobit, what you guys are doing, and what kind of companies you guys work with.
Yeah, it's a global embedded software company. We're about 35 years old, nearly 4,000 employees, headquartered in Germany. We have offices in India, Israel, Eastern Europe, Korea. In the U.S., I live in Michigan. That's our headquarters is here. Offices in the West Coast and Mexico. We're really involved inside every control system. There's 600 million vehicles on the road today that have our software, 5
Wow.
billion devices. If you think about modern vehicles, they have 100 to 200 control systems. All the control systems have a silicon microprocessor, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, NXP, others. We make the operating system and the middleware. So we
Mm,
work with a lot of the OEMs and the tier ones where they put the APIs on top. So if you think about next generation digital cockpits, software defined vehicles, cybersecurity, functional safety, it's pretty exciting. It's growing and it's a lot of new markets besides passenger vehicles too.
Interesting. Very interesting. Um, cool. I have a lot of discussion, conversation pieces I want to kind of cover in that. But before we do, let's talk about your background. How did you end up becoming CRO of this, super large organization and company and legacy company to a certain degree? I know you started off with an engineering background, so what sparked that originally?
Yeah, I was a poor mechanical engineer way back when. My father was a mechanical engineer, so when I was growing up as a child of immigrants, he gave me two options: either go to medical school or become an engineer. And I'm still reminded I could have been a doctor. So I started as a mechanical engineer and worked at the time the biggest company in the world, which was General Motors.
Yeah.
So right out of school, it was pre-bankruptcy. I learned a lot about engine testing, development, and also, the company was on a decline. So from there, I went into the supply base, and then, went back to grad school and had a mid-career crisis. Okay, what should I do? So became a management consultant, and then I realized I like working with startup and scale up companies,
Hmm.
and kind of stumbled into technology. And it took me 10 years of working to realize what I really liked. I was maybe an average engineer, but a better communicator.
Hmm.
So learned that, it took me a while to learn that. Also learned very quickly to be nice to everyone because everyone's connected. So ended up helping as when I had my own consulting practice, a lot of companies go to market, grow, enter new segments, expand their customer base. While I was doing that, I got a call. I remember exactly where I was. I was at a Costco shopping. I got a call from a company out in New York, and they said, "Hey, they're looking for someone to help us with electric vehicles." And of course, as a consultant, you never say no. Of course, I can help you. And it was a company out of Long Island. It's called Leviton Manufacturing. They're probably in your home. They're 9 out of 10 homes. They make switches and receptacles.
Hmm.
The CEO at the time was an avid golfer, and he wanted to learn about EVs because he was in the golf carts a lot. That was Don Hendler. So I put a business case together, consultative approach, and they, typical New York fashion, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They said, "Hey, we like you. We like your business plan. We'll give you some money. Why don't you start a business for us?" And that led to being a $20 million business. I deployed over 10,000 chargers, and I
Hmm.
work with Ford, Toyota, Honda, Kia. I sold on Amazon, Home Depot, electrical distribution. And even if you go to any of those dealerships today, you'll see a Leviton charging station,
Hmm.
and really enjoyed that. They had a team in New York, San Diego. I realized that the business was getting marginalized. So we had a US factory, then Mexico, then we used a contract manufacturer of Taiwan. So I thought maybe it's a time for a move. My first love was engines. Then I went to a scale up company that did electric drive systems. Very interesting. It was pre pandemic, got to do business in China and India. I had it was fun to go to business in India, being an Indian American. I came to realize they didn't like any of my jokes, couldn't understand anything I said, but did gain some business there. Everything got moved to China, The business got bought by a Mint Group, multi-billion-dollar company. I was one of the last employees in the US. It was a Silicon Valley company. Interesting guys who founded that were original employees of Tesla.
Hmm.
And then from there, I went back to charging at EV Box, ran their North American business. Then I got a call from the founder of Rhombus. And that really, again, changed my career path. A scale up company with bi-directional DC charging. And long story short, we got acquired for $185 million by Borg Warner. So great exit. One was Clean Wave, not that great. EV Box, a SPAC didn't go as well. Learned from every step. And the last one was pretty nice. And it was part of the management team. Over 200 companies, some Fortune 50 companies interested in buying us. I was going to retire, but my wife said, no, you can't retire. This was last year. The golden handcuffs came off. I'm sure you know what that's like, Chris. And and I want to do something completely out of EVs. So I drive a Tesla, like a lot of people do. And I love the idea of getting new updates every quarter,
Hmm.
something new. And I said, what is that? That's software-defined vehicles. And I came across this opportunity in Elektrobit, and it's completely different for me. But that's one of the things I've learned is you got to reinvent yourself. Start
Hmm.
as an engine guy, a consultant, an EV guy. Now I'm a software guy. So that's where
Interesting. And across, like, thanks for sharing that. I think it's, it's from a, I guess, like a high level, it kind of all makes sense, which is like you've been deep in the weeds of it from a more technical standpoint, in automotive, and you're still involved in automotive, but now software component. But you've like touched a little bit of like pretty much every facet with the trend of EV, right? If we're thinking about it from that standpoint, and all the things involved in the evolution of EV. So, and now you're on the software side, which is very cool. I think, what was compelling for you to step back into the game? Obviously you're thinking about retirement. You've had a very illustrious career already. But what was it about Electrobit that, really drew you in to show the responsibility, but, like, just take on the additional stress of being in the C-suite, right? Again, like you don't, it's, you don't need to do it. And it's got to be something that's more of a higher, I feel like a higher calling to a certain degree. What was that for you?
I love technology,
Yeah.
right? I love being around some of the world's best experts that we have in software development. I always want to learn, and I think that's something for all the other entrepreneurs listening. Anyone who wants to start a company, find something you're passionate about. It takes time, fall down a few times and learn. I'm very humbled and pleased Electrobit hired me to run their business in the Americas, and they're paying me to learn. And
Yeah.
I'm learning every day, dealing with world-renowned experts, PhDs, talking to leading companies, not only the passenger car, getting into robotics, commercial vehicles, anything with mobility, anything has a control system.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I was talking to a generator company. I mean, anything with a control system that has a silicon microprocessor can use our software. And what really is also unique about Electrobit is everything we do is open source,
Mm.
and we offer products and services. So that's a vision of our CEO, change the company in the direction. I also have to mention that we're independently operated company, but we're fully owned by Continental, which is a $50 billion company. So that also, I thought to myself, wow, this gives me all the resources I want in the world. And if I just want to learn and run a business, this is a great way to do this.
Got it. Got it. Um, and I want to kind of dive into like that pivotal moment. I think like obviously going from engineering, finding your calling into the more sales side, biz dev side of things, that doesn't seem too off base, given that you went to business school, maybe realized a different skill set, and made that transition. But I think like and this is something that I'm personally curious in, is like that transition from like lifer in sales to sales leader, or like, a CRO, which to me is just somebody who owns a more expansive version of like everything that's under revenue, right? So which sales is a big part of that. But to make that transition, it's always like a personal growth element involved into that, right? It's like I became a better communicator, I had more empathy, I developed compassion, I learned how to, share ideas that ended up being bought into, like things that um, psychologically you can work with people to instigate change, right? Because that's really what those leadership roles primarily entail. Obviously, you have the experience to share what the knowledge is, but to get the buy-in for that knowledge is in a different skill set. Where did you feel like that kicked in for you? Was it at Leviton where you started, like, got that entrepreneurial spirit, and like the way that you described it was kind of like, you were able to start from ground zero and then build something into this 20 some million-dollar business, which obviously you had to wear a lot of those different types of hats, and I'm sure really tested you over that time period. Um, did it start there, or was there another like earlier moment, or even later moment where
Yeah.
you feel like all the things aligned?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's an evolution like
Yeah,
everyone else. We're
yeah,
made of some components. Um, I have to say, all the way back to when I was at General Motors, I realized I was not going to be the chief engineer. I didn't have that. There's a certain drive, right,
yeah,
to
yeah,
be the technology leader, and the sort of, you in for those of us who've worked in big corporations, you get the performance reviews,
yep,
and it says what your strengths and weaknesses are. You do the Myers-Briggs tests, you do all those things, and the same thing kept happening over and over again. You seem to like to be more in front of people. You like to talk, and even though when I was, you as well, I was a 22-year-old running test engines on the dynamometer, running the report, and you had to give a presentation. That was the highlight for me, getting in front of people and talking. And it took me a decade to figure that out. And then I've been very fortunate that I've had good mentors. Obviously, it starts with my father, who came as an immigrant, and I learned a lot from him. And then each step of the way, I saw, and this is what I'd highly recommend, is find industry titans, people that you've met, what they've done, and try to follow that inspiration. And I write white papers. I try to speak at conferences. I love engaging in Q&A. I like getting in front of customers. Somebody wanted to offer me double or triple what I'm making on pace, probably wouldn't do it. It's something I did natural on
interesting. Um, so let's talk about it real quick. The idea of being in this position, and sharing the knowledge that you've gained. Where do you feel that comes from? Because similarly, I feel like a lot of leaders are just naturally curious, right? And they always are wanting to be in a position of learning. Um, and they're also mostly pretty accessible and willing to teach, right? And share their knowledge. Um, but then there's those that never get there. Like there's a lack of self-awareness, or like they know that they aren't equipped to maybe do something, but they don't push to do that. What about it for you is the rewarding part, whether that's like selfish or selfless, right? And even sometimes the selfless things are selfish, right? But I think what did you find that you really enjoy about that to give back to?
Well, so just to be upfront, Chris, I am a capitalist, so I do like making money. So I wake up every day, how can I make more? I don't, there's always things I'm involved in that have that sort of lens.
Yeah.
I love engaging people. Even though I've left the EV industry, I do advise several EV startup companies. One is an interesting company, Electric Fish, young people out of Fremont, building a fast DC charger, integrating a battery. I love being involved in that. Another company called FlipTurn, two MIT graduates developing a charge point operating system. Really, really cool. I like doing that. I'm also involved, I'm a Michigan guy, so go blue. University of Michigan Economic Growth Institute, I'm on their board. So the board one is a nonprofit, the other for profit. So it's a good balance. To me, it's about intellectual stimulation and also just the upside that can occur either personally, that I'm developing a skill set, or I get equity, or there's a monetary side. And a lot of the companies that I advise, I just tell them, you don't have to pay me. I just want to participate in your growth in some way. And I think more entrepreneurs should do that. And I didn't want to lose my desire to participate in the EV industry, so I still do that, and I see some synergy what I'm doing today. So I think it's quite complementary,
Mm.
and I think it's something that I'm very fortunate that it goes back to networking, being nice to people. When you see young entrepreneurs, what's your business model? How do you go into market? Who are your customers? Basic questions, and you keep that relationship open. So when they need an advisor or a mentor or someone on their board, your phone starts to ring, and it's pretty cool that way that they come to you.
Yeah. No, I understand that part for sure. On the other side of things, I mean, we can get a little bit more technical with because we have your area of expertise, which is in EV and automotive in general. But what what are some of the evolutions within the industry that you've seen? Obviously, you've gone through a lot of cycles, you've been through a lot of it. Um, and I think there's probably a lot of people who are out there. Yeah, they drive the Tesla. They see the growth of a company like this. They see like an Elon Musk, a polarizing figure who had, really on paper had no business starting an EV company, right? And helped, I think, push and commercialize the idea of what that is. You being involved in it for these past few decades, what's been what's been that insider journey like, right? Like I know that you've probably been in those moments where General Motors where they're like EV is never going to happen, or and you like the Blockbuster situation and Netflix, and
Yeah.
but then obviously some shift happens and you see that shift happening. And when did you start seeing some of these things where they became ideas of spaghetti on the wall to then like having legs to what it is today? Because we have you. Might as well ask some of those questions.
Well, you bring up Elon Musk, Mr. Musk. Anyone who's a billionaire gets Mr. for me,
Sure.
just by rule of thumb. I actually met him in 2010. Toyota was a customer of mine at Environmental Media Awards, and I saw him. Toyota at that time was early days, 2010. If you think of kind of where the universe was at, and this was in Hollywood, so there were some celebrities there. He was there with his brother, and I said, oh, "Okay, yeah, I think I know who he is." Tell you how long ago I had a BlackBerry. That tells you how long ago it
Yeah.
was. So when I chatted with him, and I know Toyota was working with him a little bit, Tesla on the RAV4. And then, as I was talking to him, I'm thinking, okay, this guy made his money through PayPal. Why is he throwing his money away to go into automotive? That would be the last place, no offense, that I would start an auto company, right? But then if you think about his path that we all know, the Boring Company, I was in Las Vegas earlier this year at CES, very cool. SpaceX, OpenAI, Neuralink, that was an inspiration to me is expand your reach. If you have something to give back, do that. That's why I get involved in a lot of different things because it's exciting and I'm always learning. But I remember the early days of charging. If you think about what's in your bathroom, like a GFCI, the whole idea was about safety charging. And I was able to sell that in like 2010, 11, 12. And now it's evolved to higher power, more connectivity, and now it's been commoditized, the hardware,
Yeah.
right? And the low cost manufacturers have come. I remember in 2011 and 12, I had the number 1, 2, and 3 charging station on Amazon. I
Wow.
felt I thought I was very cool. And I thought, oh, this is fantastic. And now, within a year of having that momentum, all of a sudden the low cost manufacturers came. Hence, we moved our factory from building in El Paso, Texas, to Tijuana, Mexico, to okay, Taiwan, and we still couldn't make enough money.
Mm.
So that kind of the evolution of this, even though it's still not saturated, so many companies have come into this space that it's a race to the bottom, especially for the residential charging. And if you expand it to vehicles, I mean, I've been in a few Chinese-made vehicles. It is unbelievable.
Mm.
I don't know what's going to stop that
Yeah.
when it comes to the U.S. Besides BYD,
Yeah.
besides Geely and others. The amount of feature sets, the price
Mhm.
point, um, I wonder what's going to happen, right? And you can block them for a while with tariffs, not to get political, but I see this the barriers to entry to go into automotive are gone.
Mm.
Used to be big stamping equipment,
Yeah.
heavy machinery. All of that is gone now with
Yeah.
the skateboard designs where you
Yeah.
have battery packs that go into the floorboard, motors on the outside, power electronics features. We all have smartphones. That is the expectation now in a vehicle, that it'll be a software defined vehicle. It'll keep updating, creating more value as you own it. That's another reason why I've left sort of the hardware space, moved into software, because I
Mm.
see where the industry is going, where there's more value to be extracted. Because on the hardware side, I see some challenges there. They're going to
Yeah.
be insurmountable.
Interesting. Um, Interesting. I have a lot of questions. I think the first thing would be kind of just talk, yeah, and I'm gonna geek out a little bit on this stuff, but I think like number one would just be, you dove into the charging component as being like one of the bigger challenges, right? Uh, I think if you're talking to the general population that may not be a technical mindset, right? Then I don't think they understand the massive infrastructure undertaking
Yeah,
that had to happen in order for this challenge of charging to be where it is from a hardware side of things, right? Like you have to have such demand for it to be able to drive the cost of it down so low that it becomes that competitive. And we're talking about not even like 20 years, you're talking about like really 10, maybe 15 years of
yeah,
time of how fast that this has gone. Um, One question was, do you think we get there without somebody like Elon Musk? Like whether it's him or somebody else that comes in is like, I'm
yeah,
going to tackle EV for whatever personal reason or mission statement.
right,
You think we get there? Because it doesn't feel like a lot of the larger conglomerates that were in the automotive space were really, maybe it's disrupting it in that way, and
right.
maybe it probably wouldn't have been. It would have been counterintuitive, perhaps, for them because of what already exists, and that undertaking of the infrastructure would just be like something that most companies, when you're a legacy company, probably wouldn't even imagine, let alone the cost of like trying to tackle something like that. And the risk of it is just so overbearing that why change the status quo? What are your thoughts on that in
Uh,
terms of like having somebody that's polarizing, whether it's Elon or not, to come in to do
yeah.
that change?
I think I've met a few founders like this where I like to play chess. Some people play 3D chess, right?
Yes, yes,
They're at a different level. They're
yes.
thinking. I've had a few. I've been fortunate where again, part of my limitation as an engineer is I sometimes linear thinking,
Yeah.
and I need somebody to disrupt my thinking
Mm,
because I'm looking to answer the question. Sometimes
mm,
it's beyond just answerable. So yes, I think he was truly disruptive. I've been fortunate enough to meet him, fortunate enough to meet a lot of billionaires, in the
yeah,
EV space. I
yeah,
didn't know they were billionaires at the time, right? And it's pretty cool that you get to meet them in early stages, and then later on you think, wow, they were so ahead of the game.
yeah,
And I worked for an automaker for a while, General Motors. I've worked with every major automaker. They would not be doing the investments because
yeah,
if it wasn't for that, it's pretty obvious. I have a Model Y, number one selling car in the world, and the Model 3 is in the top 10. Who would have thought of that? I think what's going to happen is, from when I was growing up as a kid in the 70s in Pittsburgh, you know, there was half a dozen automakers. There's going to be 100 different automakers.
yeah. Interesting.
There's going to be the barrier to entry is lower. I was just at an event earlier this year, ACTEXPO, commercial vehicle event. I remember going to that event over 10 years ago. EVs were in the corner. We were like the redheaded stepchild. Now the whole thing is electric.
Yeah,
The only time they show a diesel engine is to compare it to an electric motor to see how big it used to be, And I think it's going to be tough it's going to be a fractured market. There's going to be a lot more choices. It's pretty exciting time, and there are disruptors. You need disruptors in a market like this. You need technology innovation, such as the silicon microprocessors, the battery, the energy density, power density that we're getting for batteries. That's so disruptive. the ability to have 5G in your cars. There's so many disruptive things that it's an exciting time. And I think our grandchildren probably won't own cars. You
Yeah.
know, why? Why would you own a car? You just
Yeah.
have your smartphone or a chip in your head and say, hey, I need a car right now. It'll show up and you go wherever you want and you go to sleep and you wake up the next day, you're in Florida, wherever you want to go,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be quite disruptive. And then what does that mean to the whole ecosystem around that? Servicing, dealerships, maintenance, the number of people you need to manufacture a vehicle is going to drop. So I think as a society in the US, we have to reinvent ourselves.
Mm.
We have to have new skill sets. It's quite disruptive. Um, but it's an exciting time.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I'm imagining things like Blade Runner and like these dystopian societies where it's like your vehicle becomes a commodity, is a
Yeah.
commoditized product where
Yeah.
there's just like certain expectations like our smart devices and our smartphones, right?
Yes.
And it seems like that's kind of what, and well, then Elektrobit makes a ton of sense because like that's the brain power that's powering all these things, right? So um and that's a super interesting take. Uh, I guess like as we're rounding up on time here, how far away do you think we are from some of that dystopian imagery of you mentioned your grandchildren like not even having to own a car, obviously at the hurdle is going from something that has a has a perceived value because it's,
Yeah.
there's brand value and then we're buying things based off of, whatever that perceived value is as a brand. But like you mentioned, like BYD and some of these Chinese manufacturers where look, they're building something that's of par, if not greater than something that we see that's not, that's international company, but is allowed in the US. Um, and yeah, but the price point is much more cheaper, meaning that the cost of producing it is actually the actual raw cost of producing something like that isn't as expensive anymore. And so how far, yeah, I mean like and it's only going to get
Yeah.
cheaper, less like in yes, we have all these features, but then ultimately that'll get cheaper over time, right? The more that it becomes readily available. Um, yeah, I guess, do you think that the market is ready for that kind of a world? And uh, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it kind of is because I see like now younger generations where they don't own vehicles, they are just Ubering everywhere, even in like especially in larger
Yeah.
cities,
Right.
right? Yeah. Hmm.
Well, again, I love movies, so I love I'm thinking more like Total Recall, Arnold,
There
with
you
the
go. Yeah, yeah,
public
yeah.
access,
Yep.
and but can that be autonomous? Can that be easily? The other aspect is I have a terminal. I have to go from one terminal to the next. Why do you need a driver for that? Uh, where they're using battery swapping. They have autonomous skateboard type of equipment, the moving some of the sea containers from one place to the other. So it's going to happen in phases where you can geofence and they have defined duty cycles where it makes a lot of sense. And I think we can learn from that. I don't know why we aren't doing that faster. And then that will create confidence and it will learn from itself. And then we could phase it into more wider use cases. And, because I mean, I've been in China and India. I don't know where they're going to get autonomous vehicles there yet. It's going to take a while. But if you think about some of the use cases that I mentioned, that could happen, in the next few years because you have a very defined type of vehicle requirement, things of that nature. University campuses. I was at University of Michigan. They had an autonomous vehicle. I sat in it. Why not? And it creates an exciting opportunity where you can learn from it. And then if you take the human element out of it, it's safer, more cost effective, ROI, all of those things.
Yeah. I think that's so, I mean, to speak on innovation and disruptiveness, I also think it's funny when I mean, I think everybody realizes now what Uber really is, right? It's a logistics company, but I think when people only thought of it as just like a taxi service, and I can only imagine, like, what they were thinking, Travis and the guys back in the day,
Yeah.
and Garrett, when they first started the company. It's like we want all this data because we want to be able to transport anything from point A to point B the fastest. And I think sometimes that's the interesting part of, like, I think being on the technical side of things is knowing that a lot of these disruptive founders, what their visions are, and it's all playing that 3D chess game of, like, I'm going to spend 10 years doing this so that the next 10 we can do that, right? And
Yeah.
that's really interesting. And um, on that note, I wanted to just say thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise. It was a very interesting conversation for me. I think, like, uh, your background was very, very colorful, very interesting, and thank you so much for sharing the time.
I appreciate it. Enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.